Welcome back to Fox News at Night. We will be live right here tomorrow night with special coverage of the Alabama Senate race, so make sure to tune in for the results. In the hours leading up to the vote, there have been strong statements from national Republican leaders against GOP candidate Roy Moore, while top state Republicans appear to stay steady in their support. Here to discuss in a Fox News at Night exclusive what's going to happen tomorrow, Alabama Secretary of State John Merrill joins us live from Montgomery. Good to see you, Mr. Secretary.
Good to see you, Shannon. Thanks for having me as your guest.
Listen, I know you probably, of all people, are ready for this thing to get wrapped up one way or the other. Did you ever anticipate there would be this much attention on all of your electoral procedures and exactly how this thing's going down?
Absolutely not. And of course, this is the most widely covered event in the electoral process in the history of the state of Alabama. So we're all ready for this to be over.
All right, I'm going to ask you this. First of all, I want to play something from your senior senator there, Richard Shelby. This is what he had to say about what he decided to do.
I couldn't vote for Roy Moore. I didn't vote for Roy Moore, but I wrote in a distinguished Republican name, and I think a lot of people could do that.
All right, so Secretary, what if they do? How does that factor into what happens tomorrow?
Well, we have a procedure for write-ins, and we had actually received a lot of attention about write-ins even before any of this information was introduced. So one of the things that we did to help our people at the local polling sites was to produce a sheet of paper that answered frequently asked questions and also gave clear directions about what an individual needed to do if they wanted to write in a candidate of their choice whose name did not appear on the ballot.
Okay, so depending on how close this is or isn't tomorrow, is there anything that would trigger in Alabama a recount by statutory means, or can a candidate challenge it if this does come down to the wire? How does it work?
Yes, less than 0.5% difference between the two candidates will automatically trigger a recount, which will result in that occurring without either candidate having to pay for it.
Okay. I want to give you a chance to respond to some things that you have been accused of in the media, namely as the Secretary of State discouraging people from voting, particularly minorities and others. I want to read a little bit of this Mother Jones piece. It says, when Alabamians go to the polls on Tuesday to elect Republican Roy Moore or Democrat Doug Jones as their new senator, an untold number will not participate due to the decisions made by Merrill's office, which is in charge of ensuring a fair voting process, and by the Republicans who run the state. These laws and policies overwhelmingly make it harder for minorities to vote. Your response?
Shannon, these people are entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. What are the facts? Since January the 19th, 2015, we have registered 865,107 new voters in Alabama, which is unparalleled and unprecedented in the history of the state. As a matter of fact, per capita, no other state in the union has done what we've done in the last 34 months. And let me also add that we now have 3,328,117 registered voters in Alabama, unprecedented and unparalleled in the history of the state. We're making it easy to vote and hard to cheat in Alabama.
Well, and I understand that you also went to Google, I believe, about an ad that you said was misleading or confusing out there. What's the story on that?
We did, Shannon, because there was an ad that was running on behalf of Doug Jones and his team that indicated that if the voter cast their ballot in support of Judge Roy Moore, then that individual would be known in his or her community. And it made a lot of people very uncomfortable. That information was introduced to us, and we began to do some research. We actually contacted the young man who actually prepared the ad, had conversations with him and asked him if he would modify the ad or if he would consider taking the ad down. He indicated that he had absolutely no intention to do that, and at that point we realized we had to do something else. So we went straight to Google and to YouTube, indicated to them why we had concerns about the ad, showed them the facts that were associated with that, and they authorized the removal of that advertisement.
So basically, if you vote tomorrow in Alabama, no one's going to know who you voted for unless you decide to tell them, correct?
No, your ballot is a private matter for you and for only those that you choose to share that with.
All right. Well, we will see you right here tomorrow night at 11 p.m. Eastern. We look forward to, if we have results at the time. If we don't, we'll talk it through with you, and we'll talk about the process of what happens next, certifying whoever the winner is, getting them here to D.C. in the next step. So we look forward to it. We know you got a busy day tomorrow, and we'll see you tomorrow night.
Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. All right, it is not slowing down the flood of accusations. We're going to break down the latest sexual misconduct allegations. There are new ones tonight from Hollywood to Washington, D.C. And later, are immigration activists suing over something that happened under President Obama in order to sandbag President Trump? Our legal eagles are ready for night court. Firefighters may finally be getting a handle on some of the California wildfires, but the political rhetoric seems to be heating up as Hollywood jumps on the devastation to criticize Republican-led tax reform. Trace Gallagher joins us live from Los Angeles to explain. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. You know, the way it works now is if you lose property in an earthquake, hurricane, wildfire, or other natural disaster, anything that's not covered by insurance or other assistance can be written off on your taxes. For example, in 2015, Americans deducted $1.6 billion of uninsured losses from natural disasters. Well, the House version of the tax reform bill, that natural disaster deduction goes away altogether. And under the Senate tax bill, you can only take the deduction if the president declares a federal disaster. So far, the president has only declared the fires burning across Southern California as a state of emergency. So even the Thomas Fire, which is now 231,000 acres, which is the fifth largest fire in state history and has destroyed almost 900 buildings, would not qualify for the tax write-off. No surprise, the plan is being criticized by everyone from California's Democratic Congress members to Hollywood. Senator Dianne Feinstein says, quoting, "A family who loses everything in a wildfire shouldn't have to pray for a federal declaration so they can recover." And the actor Samuel L. Jackson retweeted an LA Times headline, quoting, "As California burns, Congress plans to slash tax write-offs for fires and other disasters. Why am I not surprised?" Jackson's not exactly the biggest Trump supporter, but in this case, the Trump administration agrees that fire victims should get the write-off. And to add insult to injury, the House bill does include a deduction for the victims of Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria, even for the victims of Superstorm Sandy in 2012 who have not yet filed their returns, but no write-off for wildfire victims. Though the GOP chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, Kevin Brady, plans to introduce legislation offering tax relief for wildfire victims. But going forward, in the future, looks like Congress will deal with these disasters on a case-by-case basis. Shannon.
All right, Trace Gallagher from LA. Thank you. Another day, another round of allegations against big names in entertainment, politics, and beyond. Kristen Fisher is tracking it all. She's got the latest on sexual misconduct allegations, and it's not slowing down.
Not slowing down. I'm going to start at the top and then kind of work my way down, Shannon. You know, the sexual harassment allegations against President Trump are nothing new. What is new is the cultural awakening that our country seems to be experiencing, this Me Too movement. And today, it extended all the way to the Oval Office. 3 of the 16 women who publicly accused President Trump of sexual misconduct spoke out during a joint press conference. They first came forward during the campaign, but now they're calling on Congress to launch a formal investigation, just like they did for Senators Franken and Conyers.
I want to believe that as Americans, we can put aside our political inclinations and admit that some things, in fact, do transcend politics, that we will hold Mr. Trump to the same standard as Harvey Weinstein and the other men who were held accountable for their reprehensible behavior.
Well, tonight, 4 senators are calling on President Trump to resign, all Democrats, but I think it's safe to say that's not something he's even remotely considering. Instead, today, the White House press secretary denied all the accusations and said that if voters had a problem with them, then he wouldn't be in the White House today.
The president has addressed these accusations directly and denied all of these allegations, and this took place long before he was elected to be president, and the people of this country had a decisive election, supported President Trump, and we feel like these allegations have been answered through that process.
Well, the Me Too movement claimed more casualties today. Ryan Lizza, the reporter for The New Yorker who effectively ended Anthony Scaramucci's 10-day tenure at the White House, he was fired today for improper sexual misconduct, though he denies any wrongdoing. Celebrity chef Mario Batali is stepping away from his restaurant empire and his show, The Chew, after 4 women accused him of sexual misconduct. And finally, Roll Call is reporting that taxpayers paid more than $200,000 to settle a sexual harassment case involving Congressman Alcee Hastings, a Democrat from Florida. So today alone, we have had a chef, a journalist, a congressman, and a president all feel the wrath of this Me Too movement, Shannon.
And no end in sight.
No end in sight. In fact, it seems to only be building momentum.
Well, we'll stay tuned. Thank you very
See
much.
what happens.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shannon.
Good to see you. Well, a Louisiana man's looking at jail time and a hefty fine after he pled guilty to trying to use the president's Social Security number. It was all part of an effort to obtain the president's tax returns via a student aid application. So after getting a username and a password with the president's Social Security number, 32-year-old private investigator Jordan Hamlet allegedly then attempted to use an IRS tool to access the president's returns. Hamlet now faces a maximum of 5 years in prison and $250,000 in fines. Hamlet's attorney says his client looks forward to presenting his case and motives and then letting a jury decide whether he did anything wrong. Well, going after ICE agents for doing their jobs. A new lawsuit says they're crossing the line and going after illegal immigrants. We'll separate fact from fiction next in Night Court. Then remember the DOJ official recently demoted for concealing his meetings with Fusion GPS, the group behind the dirty dossier? Well, James Rosen uncovered an even more interesting link. An exclusive report on that just ahead. Night Court is now in session. The left-leaning Southern Poverty Law Center announcing they are suing the Trump administration over ICE raids that happened under the Obama administration. The SPLC claims that Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents entered the homes of immigrants without warrants, consents, or probable cause, all they say in violation of the Fourth Amendment, solely to detain and deport illegals. The raids in question happened nearly 2 years ago. In its complaint, the SPLC says this, quote, when it turns out the agents are not police and they are not looking for a criminal because there is no criminal, and they are, in fact, immigration agents looking for one of your family members, it cannot reasonably be argued that you provided knowing consent for a complete search of your home. Let's talk about it with legal analyst Emily Campagno is here with the government's perspective, and National Law Journal contributor Kent Zimmerman will argue for the SPLC. Good to see you tonight, both of you.
You too.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I want to read a little bit of what we're getting from the SPLC saying this. The safety of home and the freedom from unlawful searches and seizures are among America's most fundamental values, and law enforcement officials at all levels are legally required to protect these constitutional rights. The anything goes method of the ICE agents in these raids obliterated due process, tore families apart, and did nothing to enhance national security. Emily, they say that they were showing up pretending to be police officers or pretending to be looking for a specific criminal suspect, but all they were trying to do was to get inside. They say that doesn't comport with the Fourth Amendment. What say you?
Right. Well, actually, the 11th Circuit has held that police officers or federal agents can lie to get their way in the door. And in terms of the warrantless search, viewers need to understand that the construed constitutional protection against warrantless searches is not immutable. Now, here, the Department of Homeland Security approved Operation Border Resolve in direct response to a spike in illegal border crossings by certain Central American countries. Now, the targets of this operation were those family units and unauthorized alien children who had attained the age of 18 and confirmed and suspected gang members who were 16 years and older. Every single one of these targets had a capture prior as well as a final order of departure by a federal immigration judge, and none had any pending motions before an immigration court. Actually, Southern Poverty Law Center hints at this when they mention the ankle bracelet of one of their plaintiffs, as the majority of them as well had additional criminal convictions for violent crimes. So here, the authorization and the execution description of this operation qualifies as the special and sufficiently strong justification and exigent circumstances needed for a warrantless search.
Okay, I feel like I just went back to law school. So Kent, that's a lot that we've learned there and to go through. But let me read a little bit. ICE didn't respond to us directly on the story because there is pending litigation. But this is what they had to say just days ago in a press release about how they go about doing their jobs. They said this: despite numerous stories and allegations in the media falsely accusing ICE of conducting indiscriminate raids and sweeps, the fact is that 92% of all aliens arrested by ICE this year had criminal convictions, pending criminal charges, were an immigration fugitive, or were an illegal re-entrant. So, Kent, are they being sued simply for doing what they're hired to do?
You know, Shannon, here's how I see this. When the show's over tonight, and I go home to my house, and you go home to yours, and Emily goes home to hers, and in fact, everybody watching in America tonight, we all have a right under the Constitution, under the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, to not have law enforcement bust into our house without probable cause, without a search warrant, or without us giving permission.
But is it different for us as American citizens? Is there a distinction there?
It's a great question, Shannon. And in fact, there's case law going all the way back to the 1800s that says the Fourth Amendment applies to citizens and non-citizens alike in the U.S. So whoever you are, if you're in the U.S., citizen or not, you have a right under the Constitution, which is really important to point out. And every president, President Obama, President Trump, and all those before them, they take an oath when they're on the steps of the Capitol to protect and uphold the Constitution of the United States. And that's what we're talking about. So this is not a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. This is about protecting the Constitution, and that's paramount for all of us to do.
All right, our two legal eagles do not see this the same way. So tweet us, tweet me at Shannon Bream or at Fox News Night, and let us know what you think. That's the opening and closing argument from both sides. That's Night Court, so we'll let you decide. Emily and Kent, thank you both for your expertise.
You bet, Shannon.
Thank you.
All right, we'll let you know how that turns out. Let us know on Twitter. All right, a senior Justice Department official demoted last week for concealing his meetings with the men behind the anti-Trump dossier had even closer ties to the group Fusion GPS, the firm with the ties to the DNC, responsible for that incendiary, unverified document. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen has an exclusive report, a connection now between the DOJ official and the group responsible for the dirty dossier. It's raising even more serious questions tonight.
Shannon, good evening. New disclosures confirmed to Fox News by top investigators on the House Intelligence Committee show that the link between Fusion GPS, the firm behind the anti-Trump dossier, and a top Justice Department official ran deeper than previously known. Fox News was the first to tell you last week about the abrupt demotion on Wednesday of Bruce Ohr, the Associate Deputy Attorney General, who was stripped of that title and his fourth-floor office at Main Justice amid an ongoing investigation into his contacts with the two leading figures in the controversy over the dossier, meetings that DOJ officials told Fox News Ohr had withheld from his superiors. House Intelligence Committee staff uncovered that Ohr met last year with both Christopher Steele, the former British spy who authored the dossier with input from Russian sources, and that Ohr also met last year with Glenn Simpson, the founder of Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm that paid Mr. Steele with funding from the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. Now Fox News has confirmed that Nellie Ohr, an academic Russia expert and the wife of Bruce Ohr, worked for Fusion GPS last year, indeed was paid by the opposition research firm through the summer and fall of 2016, a timeline that places her on the company payroll around the time the dossier was funneled to the FBI and perhaps through the election, some 2 weeks after which her husband met secretly with Glenn Simpson. The House Intelligence Committee Chairman Nunes told Fox News in a statement today is looking into all facets of the connections between the Department of Justice and Fusion GPS, including Mr. Ohr. DOJ, which initially claimed Bruce Ohr had been stripped of his top-line duties because he was holding down 2 jobs at DOJ, and that was, quote, unusual, today had no comment about the revelation that Mrs. Ohr worked for Fusion GPS last year. Shannon.
All right, James Rosen with that exclusive. Thank you, James. Coming up, in the wake of another New York terror attack, the state's governor questions whether Silicon Valley is doing its part. So we're going to look at whether it's fair to criticize big tech for holding fast to civil liberties in the midst of terror threats. And in case you missed it, President Trump made a big announcement about sending astronauts into outer space, the very ambitious plan. Straight ahead. This is a Fox News alert on the heels of another terror attack in New York today. Democrat Governor Andrew Cuomo pointed at the role of technology in preventing online radicalization. He's also asking whether there is a bigger role for tech companies to play in cracking down on terror.
I'm saying the internet service providers have a degree of information, right? Because they know what websites you're going to and what you're shopping for, because that's how they target the advertising. You go to buy a sweater, the next time you go on the website, you see all these sweaters for sale.
Joining us now, cybersecurity analyst and senior fellow at the Center for Digital Government, Morgan Wright, and former NYPD Intelligence Division and former CIA analyst, Buck Sexton. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Hi, Shannon.
Hey, Shannon.
Buck, I want to start with you and ask, as somebody who has worked in this field from the law enforcement perspective, how important would that information from big tech be, and what are your concerns about it being released, under any circumstance?
Well, Governor Cuomo is in a position where he feels like he has to come up with some kind of solution or some way to prevent this in the future, but relying on tech companies to police content is just simply not going to work. There's been, for a long time, an effort underway to knock down pro-jihadi Twitter accounts. More pop up. There are efforts to shut down certain websites. That's all well and good for the period of time it takes for those posting on those sites to figure out, okay, we have to go somewhere else. When you add on top of that, Shannon, the difficulty of getting into these newly encrypted apps and the different chat rooms and ways that the jihadist community has to communicate, on top of trying to decipher what in fact is jihadist versus Islamist versus just Salafi, there are all these different distinctions. It's particularly complicated, and there's no way that the answer to this, I'm not saying it's not a piece of it, it's a piece of it, but the answer to this is not just massive internet surveillance by the tech companies, because they can't do it even if they wanted to.
Yeah, and Morgan, what are the civil liberties concerns that folks have in this, and how do we, where is the line there? Because,
right.
I heard a couple of lawmakers saying today from both sides of the aisle that they were very concerned that this guy wasn't on anybody's radar if he is looking online to identify with ISIS, to find out how to build a bomb, and then apparently building the bomb or attempting to while he was at work. There are a lot of questions here.
Look, we can't keep people from watching the Final Four in college football at work. It's going to be very difficult to find who's visiting which sites. Look, I actually spent a year training the FBI how to conduct internet investigations. This was the late 90s when we started doing these kind of things. It was tough back then. It's even tougher now because, Shannon, there are 50 billion devices on the internet by 2020. There's only going to be about 8 billion people. So that's about one device for every 8 people, 6 people. It's like asking the toll taker or the state trooper to know what's in the content of every car that's passing by you on the highway. It's not going to happen. And Buck was talking about, too, the massive size of the collection of surveillance efforts you'd have to undergo. It is not up to the United States to outsource the national security to tech companies. Rather, it's find a way. How do we work together? We got to do better at targeting suspected people and going deeper on them as opposed to casting a wide net, see what we can come up with.
All right, I want to play a soundbite now from Congressman Mike McCall talking to Brett Baer tonight on Special Report, and quickly get reaction from you both. Here is what he had to say about where this goes.
As we crush the caliphate and defeated ISIS in Iraq and Syria, it reminds us, though, that they have ballooned elsewhere. They're ever present on the internet. They're also in Africa and the Philippines. And this threat's not going away.
Buck, ever present, Buck, on the internet.
Yeah, this is an ideology more than it ever was a state when we're talking about ISIS, and the crumbling of ISIS in Iraq and Syria is certainly something to be celebrated. I know the Iraqi government finally today announced we've defeated the Islamic State in Iraq. But the reality is that these different affiliate groups around the world are very strong, very problematic from a security perspective. And then you just have the ideological adherence. And we don't know what the numbers are, but the numbers are far too large. And unfortunately, it only takes one individual who is dedicated and homicidal to this and has decided to go about this jihadist mission, and you could have a mass casualty attack on your hands. So this is an ongoing fight, Shannon. There are no easy answers, and the tech companies certainly aren't a silver bullet.
Yeah, 10 seconds to you, Morgan.
Look, there's an old joke. What's the difference between love and YouTube? YouTube is forever. You're never going to get rid of this stuff. You've got the dark web on top of this, places they can go. Again, we've got to go back to targeting people. Let's not blame the technology. Let's start going after people and then apply technology to do a more effective job.
All right, Morgan and Buck, thank you both for stopping in tonight. Good to see you.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, coming up, President Trump makes an out-of-this-world announcement.
We will not only plant our flag and leave our footprint, we will establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars and perhaps someday to many worlds beyond.
President Trump making a major announcement today about the future of America's space program. Earlier today, the president signed a directive that marks a significant shift in national space policy. It calls for a U.S.-led program that teams with private sector partners to not only return Americans to the moon, but to Mars and, as the president said, many worlds beyond. Well, make sure to turn in tomorrow for our special coverage of the Alabama Senate election right here at 11 o'clock. We'll have the results and the analysis. Most watched, most trusted, and most grateful that you spent this evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon Bream. We'll see you at 11 p.m. Eastern right here tomorrow.